You had less than 30 mafia families in Italy, in Greece, in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, and in North America controlling the opium trade, the cocaine trade, prostitution, gambling, olive oil importation. I mean, and these were just 30 families or less, but then government and giant private corporations and U.S. intelligence agencies with trillions of dollars of funding since the National Security Act of 47, operating in total secret, doing whatever they want. You mean powerful, avarice-filled people aren't going to move into those positions, even if it was founded good, which it wasn't? You mean they're not going to move in and take power? You mean there's not a blue blood Yale group on record that founded the CIA almost purely of Skull and Bones? That's mainline, New York Times, to fully take over the mafia and then knock off the Italian mob.
Yeah, there's no question about this. We're talking about history now. This is not difficult to document, that there's always been a very close working relationship between the Cosa Nostra, the Mafia, and government so-called security agencies. In fact, there's some people that move back and forth. Some of the most fascinating information that's come out, in my opinion, regarding the Kennedy assassination is that there appears to be was a very close operational team put together, partly involving the Chicago mob and partly involving government agencies, primarily under the direction of CIA, but not necessarily limited to CIA. But there was a merger there, and these people worked together. So they might, compete once in a while. Sometimes they work together, and then you come away from that. You put the book down, you put down the magazine or the newspaper, whatever source, and you stare into space, and all of a sudden you say, "Oh my gosh, I see now why they work together. They have the same mentality." These are the people that have created a crime syndicate inside our government. Our government has been taken over by a crime syndicate. Once that hits you, I mean, it's really a blow for a guy like me. I was raised, a very patriotic kid. I thought America was, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and I had heard all of this, and I know that it was at one time, but I never realized that through most of my younger years that the America I knew and the America I had revered was gradually being stolen by this organized syndicate, this crime syndicate. So anyway, that's a harsh reality, and I don't expect many people to say, yeah, he's got it. They'll probably think this guy's crazy. But I guarantee you, once you start reading some of those history books and really looking behind the scenes, you're going to come to that conclusion.
Well, I have read, no exaggeration, more than 100 books, mainline history books on World War II, and the declassified Nazi files of how Hitler got to power, then what he did to secure power. All he was doing was constantly trying to stop the communist conspiracy in the government. He was constantly trying to stop the Freemason conspiracy. He was even suspicious of Catholic groups because he didn't think he fully controlled them, though some backed him. And it's all about him securing his power structure from the other mafias that were in the government.
Well, yeah, the gangs often have to do that. They're always worrying about each other. They unite sometimes because the common enemy, in a way, is the public, because they've got to fleece the public. So they'll sometimes cooperate on that. But meanwhile, they're fighting for turf. I don't think it's much different than street gangs in a big city. And they often compete with each other.
Amazing, G. Edward Griffin. I've got a lot of questions to throw out, a lot of different angles and places to go. I want to come back and take a few calls just to mix it up a bit, because we usually wait till the end for calls. But then I want to talk about all the exciting things that are happening right now and the explosive growth curve of the awakening we're seeing, and where you see that going. In fact, we've got a minute or so. Start getting into it now if you can.
Well, yeah, that probably would benefit from a little thought, but what the heck, let's just jump in and swim. There's no doubt that there is a very rise in awakening regarding public awakening of the fact that their own government has been taken over, or heavily influenced at least, by this criminal syndicate that I've been talking about. They're beginning to realize that the politicians and the bureaucrats in Washington that we generally refer to as our government really consist of people, and that these people have loyalties that are not to the Constitution and not to the people of the United States. They have loyalties to their inner group. They have loyalties to a concept of internationalism and what they fondly call the New World Order. And that these people are running the show. I mean, there are teams, supposedly, and yet they're really playing for the other side. And people are waking up to that. But no, the question is, what are they going to do about it?
All right, stay there. We're going to come back and continue to discuss this with G. Edward Griffin. We'll give you his websites as well and take your calls. Okay, G. Edward Griffin, you were talking about what are we going to do about it. Well, look at Iceland. They identified the banks as the enemy, trying to make the public pay for debts that they didn't even owe, that the banks had engineered in a Ponzi scheme. I mean, I think that's another prototype of what the rest of the world should do, just to identify these people, expose them, expose their mafia syndicate. I mean, that's all the Federal Reserve is, from my research, is a cartel. And as you exposed in Creature from Jekyll Island, your best-selling book, they met in secret, like the Mafia, to set it up.
Well, yeah, that's one of the earmarks of a conspiracy. We're back to that word again. I don't think that these guys that created the Federal Reserve thought of themselves as conspirators. They thought of themselves as being shrewd businessmen and, in a sort of weird way, being high-minded citizens. You know, they really thought that they were putting together a system that, although it was to their benefit, of course, I always start with that, it was going to be good for the country. You know, they rationalized that. It took me a while to come to that conclusion. But
that's what David Rockefeller says in a lot of internal minutes that have come out, that we bankers know best. We need to, eugenics is good. We're going to take over for you. You don't know what's best for you.
That's it, exactly. That's the collectivist mind. And so they really believe that stuff. And it's clear when you read their letters and their internal memos that they're convinced of that. So anyway, they didn't think they were conspirators because they didn't think they were doing anything wrong. And they certainly weren't doing anything illegal because they were drafting the law that would make this their plan quite legal. They were doing perhaps what we should be doing, is meeting and saying, okay, let's draft a piece of legislation that's going to unravel some of the old legislation.
You mean commoners writing legislation?
Well, maybe not commoners. Maybe we're common, but I don't think we're too common. I wish there were more of us, and then I'd say yes, commoners. But no, I think that brings up a really good point, because there's a sort of an implied expectation among a lot of newly awakening people that, well, we've got to get 51% of the population on board before anything can happen, because this is a democracy, isn't it? And the majority must rule and all of that. But the reality is that always throughout history, and certainly throughout American history, the country has been led by a very small group of people. Percentage-wise, way less than 3% of the population have always led this country, and that's true of every country in the world. The others will just go along with whatever.
And that's why the conspirators are so scared of us, because I'd say we conservatively have 15% that are now really hardcore awake, and all the polls show that, and 70% that are really upset and ready to be awakened.
Well, that's true, but the rest of that formula is the catch. It's not just the numbers. Yes, well, I would say we have 15% or maybe more, but the other part of the equation is, where are these people? Who are they? What power do they have? Well, our 15% doesn't hold enough power to match their 1%.
Because the collectivists have burrowed into all the honeypots like parasites, and they're up there greedily running everything, and they see us waking up, so they go, hire SWAT teams, build armored fortresses, scan them, control them. They're waking up that we're sucking off of them. No! We're collectivists. We're saving you from global warming. Ah!
I love that, Alex. Did you ever think of going into show business? But that's
I'm sorry,
good,
I was
actually.
having some fun.
Yeah, it is fun, but it's pretty accurate, too, amazingly so. They probably don't sound hysterical, but possibly inside their heads they're thinking that way. But that is it, exactly. Our 15 or 20%, and it's growing, just can't match their 1% or 0.5%, because, as you say, they're in all the honeypots. They're in what we call the power centers of society. They control the government. They control the military. They control the media. You know, so that gives that 1% a tremendous lever of power over the rest of the population. So back to the question, what do we do about it? we have to become influential in those same honeypots. We have to move into those areas of influence. That's what we should be doing, not just saying, oh, well, my goodness, we ought to do this and write a good paper on all. These are the things
Well, G. Edward, do you think there, and we'll talk more about solutions when we come back and go to calls, but clearly, and they even say this in some of their white papers, Cast Sunseed at the White House, that because we're waking up, because we're trying to take over the states peacefully, because we are going with the long view of history that you and others have rightfully called for as historians, they are now racing to the finish line and trying to put their control grid in to try to checkmate us before we build up enough of our initiative to defeat them.
That's it, exactly. And there's some debate as to whether or not they've already reached that point. I don't think they have.